I am focused.
No, do not do that. Do not do that.
Oh,
do not do that.
Oh crap. Oh,
do not
crap.
do that.
I was an accident. Oh my gosh.
There's some great blooper reels. Okay. Right. And that was the moment we lost an entire podcast. Welcome back to Hacking Autism, the show all about making autism your unfair advantage. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Kelsey Terry. I would love to talk as a team about active and passive touch. In the podcast, I connected with Ashley and we spoke about what that looks like in the context of a mother and son relationship. And I want to talk about what that has meant for you and I over the span of our 7 years together. And so to catch those up that haven't heard that episode of active and passive touch, the summary of it is when you're overwhelmed and stimulated, there are ways to still engage in touch with your loved ones, because maybe you have a loved one that really wants to be able to hug you when you get home from school or hold your hand when you're going through a tough moment. But yet those on the spectrum like myself can be overstimulated, overwhelmed, flooded by the day's events, and it's no fault or consequence of their loved one. But yet, how does a loved one enter in and be able to engage in touch, whether that be active or passive, to show them affection? So, Tyler, share with the listeners what that journey looked like for you and I.
Well, man, I can't believe it's been almost 10 years since we've started dating and being together, because I think it would be good to start at the beginning, because I really didn't realize when we first started dating how much you didn't like touch. I think I was just so in love and just kind of oblivious to that fact until after we got married. And then that's when things really started to show, because we weren't living together. We weren't doing that. And once we started to live together is when things...
When we were married.
Yep. I'm sorry, when we were married, things really started to show themselves in very negative light. Well, at least, I don't know if negative, but I just became a lot more aware.
Because you are a touchy person in the most appropriate way.
Yes, I am.
He's holding my hand now for those that are listening. So you would want to hold my hand in the car. You would want to have a hug after coming home from work. And maybe I was cooking, and maybe that was just the absolute wrong time to do that. And so we discussed this concept of active and passive touch that I had learned about from my psychologist. And he mentioned that there were two types of touch. There is active touch, which is if I am holding your hand and you have to actively engage in being touched. And then there's a second concept, which is new to me, this idea of passive touch. And passive touch might be slipping your hand underneath my thigh as we're sitting in the car. It's something that I don't have to actively engage in, but yet my husband still feels loved by me. And so we first implemented that, and that went well some of the time. But then our mentor, Deb, she suggested, well, what if you, instead of, always insisting on passive touch, Kelsey, what if instead you had a way to signal to one another that you wanted to, quote unquote, touch the other? It sounds inappropriate when it's taken out of context.
Right on.
We came up with, we have many codes, we have code words, but this...
Don't knock. If you're gonna knock, don't, because the dogs are in the room. They're gonna think someone's here.
There's an auditory cue of knocking, and so I'm not gonna do it. He would knock on the dash of the car or knock on the stovetop next to, where I was cooking as a visual signal to me.
And auditory.
There's that too, but it was like, okay, so he can just put that out there. I would love to give you a hug. I would love to hold your hand right now. And then that allows me to make that decision. And it took us some time to figure that out fully, because I always wanted to be like, no active touch ever. Forget that. Death to active touch. But I had to push myself outside of my comfort zone to say, I can't say no active touch ever and hope to be in a thriving relationship with my husband. And so it's walking that line of, where am I at right now? And could I push myself outside of my comfort zone to engage in that active touch? Or is now a moment where I would be okay with a passive, like, he puts his hand under my thigh. And then sometimes there's just like, please, no touch. Like, it's tax season. Please do not touch me. And so, Tyler, what did that feel like? What did that look like to you, that journey and the evolution between the two of us?
Well, as being a feeler and a toucher, gosh, that does sound really bad. As someone who enjoys physical contact with their spouse, that even sounds horrible as well. I'm just gonna say it. Whoever, like people like me, I like to touch people. Like when I
even if it's a hand on a shoulder.
Even if it's a hand on a shoulder, like, hey man, or hey, can you do this for me? It really mean a lot. Like a little fist bump on the shoulder. We can do a fist bump like this. Gotta always explode. If you don't explode the fist bump, there's a problem.
As I would say, potato, then French fry.
Potato, French fry. Here, one more. The squid. That's my personal favorite. Anyways, as you couldn't tell, I love touch. I love hand gestures. I really like being animated. And it was a very, very, very difficult thing for me to get. This act, like, because I was always active touch and no one ever really gave me any problems with active touch growing up. And so that was something completely foreign to me about not being able to hug at command, to fist bump, to anything you can think of. And from going to all the time to drastically reduced was extremely difficult, and it still is, because I would like to do those things with her, but it's just not possible all the time. And I've done not a very good job in respecting that, because sometimes I just want to hug and I'll just do it, and then it turns into a very negative outcome for me. And at the end of the day, it is very selfish for me to want that when I know that's not what she always can do. But I kind of struggle because, are my needs always secondary? And that's the current dilemma that I face right now.
Well, and I think to elaborate on that, it goes back to the idea of what's my preference and where does my comfort zone end, versus what I can actually accomplish. And so a stretch goal for me might be passive touch and engaging in passive touch on the regular. That might be a stretch goal, when my preference might be like, please don't touch me ever. If we could just like wave across the room, that would be great. But as a spouse and being in a marriage that I want to be healthy, I challenge myself to say, okay, well, what's your preference, and like, what can you actually manage? Because there's often a difference, and the degree to which we go outside of our comfort zone is the degree to which we grow. And so I've been trying to be more on top of, I think passive touch is probably easiest in the car, when you want to like put your hand under my thigh if you're driving into the city. And I think we've come a long way.
We definitely have.
We both definitely have our selfish moments where it's like, yes, touch, or no, never touch. That middle ground is often passive touch, but I try to be cognizant of, when was the last time I actively pursued or engaged proactive touch of, giving that bear hug when he comes home from a day of work, or when I'm cooking, which is like, in my mind, one of the most, I love to cook, but it's a very high stimulation process of like making sure everything comes out at the same time. You think it's very attractive when I cook, and so you want to hug me, and I'm like, no, stay away.
we need to share our favorite story about.
This does map to touch. Yes, please go ahead.
When we first got married, I am a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. I relapsed, and then went to treatment, and then we went to counseling, and we went to this counselor. Her name is,
And that's all we're gonna say of her.
Was a very sweet, nice person. But she, as we discovered, like 2 sessions in, was very new to the counseling game. And once we kind of figured that out, like, we're like, oh, that's why this has been so awkward. But I think it was like our 3rd session, and we were having a really, really tough one. Like, she was actually asking good questions that night, I think, and, things were being uncovered and all this stuff. But then I developed this passive touch that actually doesn't involve touching, but for me, it's kind of funny and
I think it's a way for you to visually symbolize like a big bear hug across the room.
Yep.
So we should describe for those that are listening that don't have access to the
Yes. Okay. So what I do, if any of you have ever seen The Shining, the little boy, crap, I can't remember his name. It doesn't matter what his name is. He lifts up his finger, and he has his index finger, and he has like an imaginary friend called Tony, and like he moves his index finger like up and down like in talking, and goes like, "What do you think, Tony?" Or like just ridiculous thing. And I saw that, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna talk through my index finger, but man, this would be a great way to do passive touch. So what I started to do was I would look at Kelsey across the room, and I'd go, "Gotcha." And so, like, I would extend my arm with my pointer finger, pointed up straight in the air. I'd curl it down, real quick. It's like I'd hook you, like, "I gotcha."
fish.
And so, like, it's the best of both worlds. I can feel like I got her, like I, express my love to you in the touching way without touching you, and you think it's really funny. So going back to the counseling appointment, it was the tension was so thick, like you could have reached out and grabbed it like that.
What you do to dissolve that tension
is comedic relief of any kind. And so I turned to Kelsey, because she's on the other couch, a few feet away, and I go, "Tingy," and with the hook finger, and leans in real close, has her clipboard, on her legs, and just like squeezes her legs together, puts her hands on her knees, and inches forward real close to us, and she goes, "What's that?" And I kid you not, I bursted out laughing. Tears were flowing. Kelsey was, I think you were like super pissed in the moment.
I was.
And because it was so incredibly funny. And then
she was very much a free spirit person, and that's my husband's personality, if you can't tell. And I'm very much a anvil, or more of a grounded linear type A person. And so sometimes I lack patience for the free spirits in the room.
And so, like, I just erupted with laughter. Kelsey was pissed, and then noticed that Kelsey was very visibly upset, and she kind of could tell, like, Kelsey really wasn't digging her, and goes, "Kelsey, I just think you need to just talk to little Kelsey, your inner Kelsey, like the inner child or whatever," and which I think is very, it's completely valid. It's a proven, counseling, method. But like at this time, Kelsey wasn't she wasn't having any of it. And she was just like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And then we never saw for that, but we have said that the money that we did spend to go see was worth it in spades, because we have told the Tingy hook story about 100 times to our friends, and everyone just always gets a kick out of it. So with that very long drawn out story, I can hook her, or I can get her without actually touching her, and it fulfills me in a very unique and special way. I'm not saying that the hook's gonna be everyone's end all solve problem, but for me that works, and I also love just being funny and goofy, and that's a way for me to be that too. It's also a unique way for you to say, I love you, I care about you, I'm with you. He might do that on the other side of a room if we're in a large space. Yeah, like at a party. If I'm talking to someone, he's talking to someone, he'll reach over that person and still do the hook finger, just to, basically silently and very specifically to me say, I love you, I'm with you. I would love to give you a bear hug right now, but I'm going to tingy you instead. So anyways, that's the story of Tingy. And so Tyler, I would ask you, what would your advice be to spouses of autistic adults, of those that are on the spectrum? Guidance, tips, suggestions from your 7 years of being married to me, but 17 years of knowing me. I mean, I wouldn't say that this is necessarily just directed towards people that have, spouses on the autism spectrum, but just communication. I think that is easily the number one answer to just about any single problem or situation. And I would say to those specifically with spouses on the autism spectrum that there's something called communication, and there's something called complete over communication, which is where I believe that a lot of I'll just speak for Kelsey. Over communication is the best way to success. And you might be thinking, well, we're talking about touch, but I think that with Kelsey, a lot of it is, if I'm like surprising her, that can just lead into an epic meltdown, and that can save you a lot of heartache by like, hey, I'd love a hug right now. Can I get a hug? It's either going to be yes, no, or in a little bit. And it's usually in a little bit. Yep. Like, let me finish cooking this, and I would love to hug you. Honestly, for me, I really don't like that, if you want me to be brutally honest, because I want it right then and there, because as a free spirit feeler, whatever you want to call it, it's like that's the moment, and then the moment passes, but then I got to learn how to be okay with it. So I guess in reality, it's just be patient and do your best to not get upset. So someone told me once, you just gotta try to take emotion out of it. And I looked at this, actually it was Deb. Deb told me to just take emotion out of it and just be all logical. I mean, you might as well tell Tyler not to breathe. Yeah, I mean, it was like the craziest thing I've ever heard, and I've tried that, and it's just, I guess with anything, practice makes perfect, but that to me is just beyond challenging. So I would say patience and over communication are the keys to success in that area. Well, with that, thank you for joining me this Friday afternoon, Tyler. Yeah. For those of you that have made it this far, consider leaving a review for this podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, consider hitting that subscribe button. I would love to connect with you guys on Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube and hear, what did you resonate with most in our story or in any of the episodes. I look forward to connecting with you guys there. Thanks, guys.